I will introduce our first speaker for these webinar series, Kate Wetherow. She is a knowledge management specialist at the Canadian Co-operative Association. She's been with CCA for the last 8 years, working in both programming and at the Cooperative Development Foundation of Canada in resource development. Kate is now focused in knowledge management, working across both organizations to support projects and share the results with the programming and with stakeholders. With a visual management approach, which you'll see today, lots of pictures, Kate combines tools and techniques in both knowledge management and Lean to promote process improvement and organizational learning. And just from our standpoint as knowledge brokers here at the Canadian Centre for Substance Abuse, we've really learned a lot from Kate, and we're really excited she's here to share some of her methods and tools. So thank you, Kate. I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today and to share my practice with you. As Jill said, my name is Kate Wetherow, and I'm a knowledge management specialist at both CCA, the Canadian Co-operative Association, and CDF, the Cooperative Development Foundation of Canada. We grow and establish cooperatives in developing countries in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. We have a highly educated staff who frequently travel around the world to monitor our projects, and they return back to our headquarters here in Ottawa with lots of knowledge to share. Today we're going to look at what happens inside your organization that impacts the products and services you deliver to beneficiaries outside your organization. So I'm going to take you through what we'll be covering today by using CCA as a case study for organizational learning. So we're going to look at key knowledge work questions. Who are our knowledge beneficiaries and users? How do we practice? And what are our knowledge wastes? But we're going to spend the bulk of today's presentation looking at tools and techniques to improve processes, communicate, display and socialize knowledge, as well as report and share it. So we're also going to be doing polls throughout the presentation where we get to get your feedback on some of the subjects that we discuss as we move through the presentation. The first question I have for you today is, how many participants think they work at a learning organization? So respond with yes, no, or maybe. At CCA, we consider ourselves a learning organization, and that is a business term that's given to a company that facilitates learning and continuously transforms itself. My practice as a knowledge worker deals with the interesting tension between efficiency and creativity, which often produces innovation in our programs. I use both lean process improvement and knowledge mobilization to support the delivery of value in my organization. Now let's look at the result of this first poll. So, wow, I see quite a few people think that they work in a learning organization, and quite a few people who aren't quite sure, and maybe their organization does a little bit in some ways and could do a lot better in other respects as well. Let's continue to discuss this as we move further. The first principle of Lean, and I believe in knowledge mobilization as well, is to understand the value you bring your beneficiary. For us, the beneficiary is the co-op or credit union members in developing countries who benefit from the projects that we deliver. This is one of my favorite photos, and it's from several years ago, but it shows a credit union staff person in Sierra Leone updating the savings book of one of our credit union members. His name is Benjamin. 90% of Sierra Leoneans are estimated to have limited access to financial services, and our project is helping to establish a credit union system there for one of the poorest countries in the world. We're just having a technical issue while our polls update. So before we go on to the next slide, which deals with knowledge users, I'd like to say that in my practice, I focus more on the knowledge user than on the beneficiary. And my knowledge user is the staff at CCA and CDS, who work directly to deliver value to those beneficiaries like Benjamin. Staff in general are often an under-mobilized resource within organizations. At CCA, I organize learning opportunities such as Learning Week to share knowledge that will improve our programs. The picture here is from one of our staff retreats, and the staff are speed dating. This was at a time when we were encountering a lot of change in the organization, restructuring, and different jobs were being switched and changed around. So the staff had a real need to reconnect and get to know each other, and this was a great way to do so. As mentioned earlier today, we're going to look at what happens inside your organization that impacts the products and services you deliver to beneficiaries outside your organization. For us, this work really began about 3 years ago when the strategies for success included the line to learn and innovate. This really became a window for us to expand our knowledge work. In international development, learning and innovation units are emerging at many NGOs as a result of the new competitive funding requirements. So if we don't learn and innovate, we will not be able to grow as an organization and compete for projects and donor dollars. So it's really essential for us. So how do we actually promote organizational learning? At CCA and CDF, this work is now housed within a tactical unit called ELK, which I know is a little bit funny, but for us it means evaluation, learning, and knowledge. Who does this work? It's the knowledge management specialist, myself, as well as our monitoring and evaluation specialist. And we have 3 focuses. The first is institutional capacity building, tools, training, technical expertise. And the technical expertise, the second focus, is about advising on projects, performance management frameworks, baselines, evaluations, and the reporting process. The third focus for us is learning and knowledge sharing, which is learning events like Learning Week, the dissemination of programming results, and tracking that learning for staff. As I mentioned, we began our journey about 3 years ago, and we're just past the pilot phase, and we're entering an institutionalization where our jobs have become full-time permanent, and our work is becoming more and more embedded and integrated into how we function as an organization. We work with staff teams to ensure continuous improvement of our processes and share lessons learned. So this is what it looks like. Here's what we call the ELK pipeline. So we cultivate and harvest data within our projects, and the monitoring and evaluation function works to do that. We take that data and we process it through analysis, research, and reporting and create reporting products. But then we ask, what's the impact, or so what? What about all of that data? What about all of those numbers and those narratives? And we create synthesis products, we use the learning from those products, and we share them out and learn inside the organization as well as create learning opportunities outside the organization. In order to facilitate this work, CCA uses a business methodology called Lean. Here's another question for you guys today. Does anyone else use Lean in their organization? Yes or no? Lean is a continuous process improvement methodology that originated at Toyota in Japan. It's about empowering people to solve their own problems. It's a series of principles, concepts, and tools that focus on the elimination of waste. I'm seeing from the poll that a lot of you don't use Lean in your organization, so I'll be telling you a little bit more about how I work with Lean as we go along today. For us at CCA and CDF, the purpose is to improve operational efficiencies and effectiveness in key processes, to build that staff capacity so that we can analyze our own workflow, and to make improvements and also enhance creativity by freeing up time to focus on priority work. We believe that Lean helps facilitate the flow of information and knowledge. By looking at your current process, you can identify waste conditions and then improve your process. So this is always a great slide to look at because there are three perspectives of any process. There's what you think the process is, there's what it actually is, which is oftentimes very complex and convoluted, and then there's what you want it to be, which is a smooth and seamless delivery of value to your beneficiary. Lean has identified many waste conditions, and when you're improving your processes, you want to remove those waste conditions. So there's things like barriers, defects, overproduction, overprocessing, wait times, poor skills and training of employees. In knowledge mobilization, there are also many knowledge wastes that impede processes and sharing. And I have to say that when I give this presentation, this is often the most provocative slide I share because immediately knowledge workers raise their hands and are nodding their heads, thinking about knowledge wastes in their own organizations. Here's a few that I'll share with you today. So there's hoarding, people who are afraid of change and fear for the security of their job and feel very territorial over their knowledge. There's also what I like to call the specialness complex, which is when subject matter experts protect their knowledge and they don't want to share it because it's what makes them important within the organization. At a lot of really big institutions and bureaucracies, and certainly within governments, there's a lot of communication hurdles. And I've certainly spoken with knowledge workers who find that even just the simple task of sharing a piece of knowledge can be so complex, and there can be so many steps in order to do that, that it really becomes less relevant the longer the process is. They also have difficulty with permission, being allowed or enabled to share their knowledge. And this can really be, again, a waste or a barrier in their work. I know that this subject excites a lot of you, so we can talk about knowledge waste again at the end of the presentation, and I'd love to hear more of your knowledge wastes that you experience. There's a lot of alignment between Lean and knowledge mobilization, and at the 2016 Canadian Knowledge Mobilization Forum in Toronto, I presented a poster on the use of both in my work, and it was called the Visual Management Toolbox. And here I am with my poster. It was because of this poster and the many people I spoke with at that event that people really became interested in my tools and techniques. And many people came back to me and commented that this simply doesn't happen in their workplace, that organizational learning is not a priority, even though they may have knowledge teams and other groups of knowledge workers within their organization. So what we're going to do today is review the series of tools and techniques that I use incorporating both Lean and knowledge mobilization. And I'll also make sure that we post on the Learning Network's website later detailed notes about each tool and technique, and it'll include what the tool is, outcomes of using them, types of work that they support, as well as types of processes that they support. So for now, I'll go quickly through them in terms of just reviewing them, and then we can ask more questions later, and we'll post more resource materials on them later as well. So this is a photo of what they call in Lean a Kaizen event. And Kaizen means continuous improvement and change for the good of all. It's a workshop that visually maps the current and future states of a process, and it identifies any unnecessary waste. Here I am working with the finance team as well as some representatives of our programming department as well. And we're analyzing the delivery process for our monthly financial information. So what you see on the back wall behind me is a complete 360-degree look at the process in its entirety. And we're looking at how we can improve that process together as a group. In Lean, we do a lot of process mapping and visualizing our processes so that we can look at them objectively and work on improving them. Another Lean technique that we use and is really popular in our office is process mapping. Teams meet together and they identify and visually outline, often usually using sticky notes or Post-it notes, timelines and the deliverables of a process. So in this photo here, I'm teaching a group of staff about process mapping and how they can create a process map for themselves. Now, process maps are usually defined by a particular time period and a submission date or a special event. So we're looking at the one that was created by our fundraising team in the foundation, and it details month by month, working towards a large special event, what they're going to do to deliver on that special event. Here's another Japanese term for you. It's gemba or gemba, and it basically means go and see where the work is happening. It's a technique used in Lean to identify and observe the action at the source, so where it's really happening. Our monitoring and evaluation specialist, Anna Brown, my colleague, as you see here, loves gemba as part of her work. She loves gemba especially during reporting periods where it's absolutely essential that she continually checks in with people to see where they are in their reporting process. Here she is in Lean training and also talking with a partner in Uganda. In-person staff check-ins ensure open communication, quality assurance, and active problem solving, but they also really make people feel well supported. And as a monitoring and evaluation specialist, your role is as a critical friend in a lot of these processes. So she finds these personal check-ins really important in delivering on her work. Meetings can be really efficient when you turn them into a team huddle, and especially when using visual management tools like the process map or this visual board that you see here too. Here's Anna again and one of our senior program managers, Erin Mackey, reviewing a process map. It helps them quickly monitor the progress of that work and identify any issues or supports required. The huddle board on your right is what I use with my administrative team that supports all of our programming managers. We check in on a weekly basis and look at what our weekly activities are, what are other events or things happening in the office that might take away from the delivery of these weekly activities. And we also have a barometer that monitors our workflow, so that we can see whether or not we're low, moderate, or as we like to say, spicy in our work that week. Another group that I work with on a biweekly basis is the knowledge team. I lead the knowledge team, who are representatives from across the organization, from all of our different departments, from finance to programming, in a mind mapping meeting, which is often anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes long. And we ask the important question of what is happening in the organization right now that is worth sharing. We brainstorm it all out on a visual board, and then we look at the key information that's emerging, and we prioritize it, and we share it out. So the most important things for us is an overall feature piece. So what's the most important thing on our board? What's the most important example of learning? What's the most important example of improvement? And what's the most important example of innovation, or something that's new or different? And then we share that out in our knowledge bulletin. Here's another question for you guys. How many people have a way to share important stories with their staff? Do you have an intranet, a social platform, or just a plain old-fashioned newsletter? Love to see the poll's reactions. For us at CCA and CDF, we have a newsletter, which we call the Knowledge Bulletin. And it's the work from the knowledge team's meeting that we share out in the Knowledge Bulletin. So again, that's learning, improvement, and innovation stories. We piggyback on our in-house constant contact media sharing service, and we do this by and for staff only. So no one outside the organization sees our Knowledge Bulletin. It's something exclusive, and it's something just for us, and it makes our staff, be they stuck at an airport or working from a field office at one of our projects around the world, it makes them feel connected with our Ottawa headquarters and part of our team, no matter where they are. And so it's really important for us that it's sharing that relevant information and those important stories. So I see that about 14 people have an intranet, about 7 have a social platform, about 10 have a newsletter, and quite a few people have either something other or nothing at all. That's really interesting to see that mix in the audience today of different ways of sharing stories internally. Another thing we do at CCA is that we've taken a wall from one of our high traffic corridors and we've turned it into a knowledge wall. So here I am, and I'm working on the knowledge wall, literally. We make use of it in several component parts. So there's a huge whiteboard space that I draw on and I share knowledge on. There's also a bulletin board where we can post important stats, infographics, reports, etc. We post our knowledge bulletin. And we also have a learning calendar where we write down all of the learning opportunities that month, be it a training or an on-site event, so that staff can keep up to date with what's happening. Staff see the knowledge wall as a tangible space for learning and sharing in their everyday life. It makes learning very present, and it socializes knowledge. If you're interested, I do a lot of sharing of images on my Twitter account at Kate Wetherow, and you can get a glimpse into what we as a staff are thinking about at any time during the course of the year. Another thing we do every once in a while is we practice kamishibai, again another Japanese term derived from lean, called storytelling. This is an example from 2015 where we were delivering on a giant final evaluation report. It was the biggest that our organization had ever put together. And while quite a few of our staff were working on this report, we wanted to make sure that absolutely everyone was kept in the loop on its progress. So we decided to have a little bit of fun, and we created a large mountain. And as we reached the different milestones in creating this evaluation report, we had a mountain climber moving up the mountain until he reached the summit, or the submission date. So what this did was it made sure that absolutely everyone knew where we were in the process and felt informed about the process. And at the end, once we had submitted the report, we checked off the different milestones on the mountain. And then, I unfortunately don't have a picture of it, we shared out the important statistics from that process and pictures so that everyone knew that they were part of this extraordinary feat and this extraordinary program that took part over the last 4 years. So it was about storytelling, it was about sharing the story, and it was about everyone being part of that story. Here's another question. How many people have whiteboards in their meeting spaces or in their office? So a whiteboard, either a whiteboard for marker or a chalkboard, a smart board, so a digital computer interface, or nothing at all. We have 2 white walls in our office, the one you saw on the knowledge wall, and we have another large one in our boardroom meeting space. We use both as interactive wall spaces for graphic facilitation. And by this I mean collective collaboration and a lot of consensus building activities. So here what you're seeing are 3 examples. On your left, there's a logic model for a remittances project. On the bottom is a communication stakeholder plan. And then on your right is actually what turned out to be a training manual for within our project, and what would be included and what would not be included in that training manual. It's important to note that you don't have to have artistic skills to use whiteboards. They're so important just to make sure that everyone is sharing the same vision and that everyone's on the same page, if you will, with a process. Let's see what the poll says. So we have about 18 people today who have a whiteboard space. That's really great. 3 people with a smart board, and quite a few, 9 or 12 that have nothing or no answer whatsoever. So it's neat to see that you guys have the potential to do graphic facilitation work in your offices as well. I go a little bit further with my whiteboard wall. I really think that mobilizing knowledge should be fun, and so I draw a lot of infographics on my knowledge wall. And I use it as a way to share out our programming results and our special initiatives. So on the left, you see an example from our Women's Mentorship Program, which is our flagship program. And I'm sharing out the most up-to-date statistics on our program. On the right is a celebration of last year's Earth Day in 2016, looking at our environment work. So the roots of the tree are our environment and climate resilience principles, and in the branches are the impact statistics from our project. It's a way to socialize knowledge and make knowledge fun in the office. It's visual and easy to take in, and sometimes we do things that are really fun, like games or engagement activities, so that staff can also participate and actively write on the walls too. The question that I'm always asking as a knowledge mobilizer in my workplace is, what do staff really need to know right now to do their jobs better? And that's how I gauge what kind of content I want to put on the knowledge wall. It's kind of like the TED Talks. What are the ideas worth spreading? So you're probably asking, how do I do this? So I have a little video of me drawing on the knowledge wall that I'd like to share.
Initiative.
Nope. Yeah, start.
Knowledge management at the Canadian Co-operative Association. One of the tools we use to mobilize knowledge is our whiteboard knowledge wall. We use this to create infographics. The wall becomes an interactive space for information sharing and also socializing knowledge. We educate and share with staff on important programming results and special initiatives.
Here's an example from International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women in November 2016. Thanks to staff who lent a hand.
So that was an example, a real-life example of how I use the knowledge wall and how I get staff to participate in that mobilization work. I'm going to divert a little bit and go into some of our learning activities. How many of you participate in an annual staff retreat? Yes? No? I'm going to share what we do with our learning activities at CCA. Many retreats involve strategic or work planning, and we all know that at conferences and these type of events, it's about the learning and the informal communications that take place, which, as you can imagine, is hard at an international development organization. But we ground all of our staff in Ottawa, and we bring in a lot of our field staff, and we go off-site. We actually go away from our day-to-day office and away from our computer. And we have an agenda that's packed with good practices, lessons learned, and big questions that we don't have time to ask at any other time. It's important for us to pause and reflect on who we are and why we do what we do. We've also become a bit competitive and really embraced adult education principles. And so we do a lot more interactive, hands-on learning, from panels to proactive work sessions like the one that you see in the image here, to games. Anything that helps embed the learning. We even have a lot of energizers and icebreakers that come to us from the different projects around the world and giving us a sense of the different cultural experiences of how different people learn in different environments. So I see that about 17 of you participate in 9 of you participate in staff retreats, and 17 of you don't. Many have no answer at all. That's really interesting. For us at CCA, learning has become more and more part of how we interact as a staff team. So I wanted to share this with you, which is a window into one of our thematic training courses, and this is Co-ops 101. So when new staff begin at CCA, we have been trying to really improve our orientation and onboarding practices. So we've developed in-house learning classes or workshops. So here you see Co-ops 101 being facilitated by our co-op development specialist, and she's teaching new staff about co-ops and co-op development through playing Co-opoly, which is a game. So the staff get to develop a co-op on their own and run that co-op as a business so that they understand how our partners work and why we believe that the cooperative model and cooperative principles are the best approach in development. We also have a lot of internal learning events. We use our boardroom as much as possible as a learning space. We conduct our own in-house, but we also invite guests to come in and use our space and share their knowledge. This is an example of a November learning event called Ag for Aid, and it was co-hosted with Food Grains Canada. A panel of speakers discussed trends in agriculture from different African countries. We had an open call for staff to participate, and it's really awesome because it's an ongoing professional development opportunity that is informal and interesting and adds different perspectives to the way we approach our work. It's not a tool or a technique per se, but it's a mechanism for supporting knowledge sharing. And what would a knowledge management webinar be without an example of knowledge translation? So for us, we share the impact of our programs through bridge notes. These are internal products that we create that summarize the giant reports and evaluations that we produce on an annual basis. Think to yourself of Cliff's Notes or Cole's Notes, those summaries of thick novels that you used to use in high school to study for your English class. We create bridging documents that mean you don't have to read the 100-page report, but you can get the high-level impact statements that you're looking for that really tell you the important things about what's valuable in that project and that work. We share this information out, well, we share the bridge documents with our communications, business development, and fundraising staff so that they are better able to communicate with our donors, our volunteers, our funders, and other stakeholders. So this is our primary knowledge translation product or tool. Finally, the last tool I'm going to share with you today is for external learning events. So we, as many of you, go out to conferences and workshops and learning events, but you want to share what you've just experienced back at home in your office with your staff, your peers. So I learned about this tool when I took Peter Levesque's Knowledge Management Certificate at the University of Ottawa Centre for Continuing Education. It's called the 333, and it's 3 ideas you took away, 3 people you will follow up with, and 3 actions you intend to take. It's a way of synthesizing your experience so that people have a very high-level, at-a-glance understanding of what your experience was and what learning you took away. It can be embedded in an email, or you can circulate it in a Word document, but it should be very simple, at a glance, and easily digestible. Hopefully you'll use this, this tool today, and if not, in the near future. It's really practical, and we get a lot of use out of it at our work. Today's webinar was about working with knowledge users inside your organization to deliver better value to beneficiaries outside your organization. The purpose can be summed up in this quote from a staff survey several years ago. Now, while I read this quote out loud, tell me if you identify with this statement, with a yes or a no. It makes CCA look bad in the eyes of partners for us to make demands on their accountability and communications when our own bottlenecks impede us from delivering our own services efficiently. Slowly the poll is increasing, and many people say that they identify with this statement. It's not only about walking the talk. It's about new ways of looking and listening and sharing with each other as staff. The whole point of this presentation is to say that you should make sure that you're not always pushing knowledge out, but you have to also share knowledge within. A final visual to leave you with today demonstrates the value of organizational learning. On the left, I'm teaching a class, an in-house class, Lean 101. And one of our new staff this past year was our Indonesia program manager. He took the tools and the techniques back with him in his work in Indonesia and applied them with his partner organization. And that partner organization will be improving the lives of its co-op members, which in this case is a cooperative that works with seaweed, milkfish, and shrimp farmers. So here you have the pipeline of knowledge sharing and the impact that sharing knowledge inside your organization can have. So this is the end of my presentation. Now we'd like to go to a question and answer period. I'd really like to thank all of you for joining me today and look forward to these questions.
So I have several that have come in from the audience, and I'll keep monitoring the chat box for others. With regard to your elk slide, Susan wanted to know, is time necessary for the embedded aspect, or are there shortcuts?
I think time necessary. I think that anytime you have a culture shift or you're adapting to a new form of practice within your organization, you do require time. We slowly introduced and eked out level of effort in our work to develop these roles, and it took 3 to 4 years to do so. And in that time, we slowly saw a culture shift in our work. So I think that when you're doing good quality knowledge work and good quality teaching and internal organizational learning, you do have to take the time to really embed that and move from first a pilot phase into an institutionalization phase. And I don't think there is a shortcut. But you should always try new things, and you know, if you have uptake that moves quickly, then surf on that and work with it. But for the most part, change requires time.
Thanks, Kate. Let's see. So there's been a number of other comments. The visual toolbox poster looks fantastic. Can it be shared? And I'm assuming it can, or not. Oh, I made assumptions.
The actual poster does not exist anymore, but I do have a PDF version of it that I can post and share with the group when we post all the resource materials to the WordPress site.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to questions first, and then I'll share some of the comments. Folks wanted to know how, so let me see who. It was M.A. Smith. I'm thinking Matt Smith from Dr. Who, but that's not. How many people work at CCSA? And then Vicki kind of riffed on that and asked how many at the head office versus how many in the whole organization.
Oh, okay. So there's about 35, so we're a small NGO here in Ottawa, and about 4 of those staff are focused on the charitable foundation fundraising component, which supports the programming. And then we have satellite offices in Colombia, Sierra Leone, Uganda, and Malawi. And there's 1 to 4 staff at each who are paid by CCA, and then we work with partner organizations there too. So we have partners around the world in all the countries I mentioned, in all the continents I mentioned, Africa, Asia, the Americas, as well as a bit in Eastern Europe. So we're a small outfit, but we need to stay connected, and so the tools and techniques I shared are really important to do that.
Cool. Another question is, Kate, are you able to monitor access to the content in the knowledge bulletin so you see what's popular and how many people in the organization you're reaching?
Yes. So to be clear, it's not an intranet or a forum. It's a newsletter that I edit. So I do control the content. So we do our brainstorming activity. We identify the key articles that we want to share out, the key stories that are really important. And then staff, not myself, staff write the different articles based on their experiences. I edit them for formatting, and then I put them together in our newsletter, and I email it out to our staff list. It's very basic, very simple, low cost.
Cool. Let's see. Vicki likes the idea of bridge notes and summary products. Are you able to share some examples or a template?
I can share a template.
Cool.
And it's very, again, very high level, quantitative, qualitative, what's innovative, key links to stories and case studies, so that it's very interpretive, and again, the most interesting features bubble to the top. And again, we're continually asking in those bridge notes what's important, what shares our impact, and what would our donors and stakeholders like to know about what we're doing in the project.
Thanks, Kate. Vicki also asked, can you give us some examples of when things haven't gone so well? Vicki reminds us that here at the network, we're interested in sharing challenges as well as success stories.
In general, I think that you know, when you work at any organization, you're going to have a full spectrum of learners. And I know that in my practice as a knowledge worker, I've been trying to get better about understanding the different forms of learning and the different ways people process information and how people want to engage. Some people want to engage more than others. I have a really active, engaged staff who are reading and learning and sharing and traveling and thinking about big questions a lot of the time. And I remember one of the pieces of feedback that I got from a new staff person who was experiencing one of our learning weeks for the first time was, whoa, there's a lot of horsepower in this room, which means that there's a lot of people thinking a lot of big stuff. And that can be really alienating for people who may be introverts, who may be new to the organization. And so I'm constantly thinking about access points and ways to make our events and our activities interesting and engaging for all those different types of learners. I've certainly had examples of challenges but I also want to respect my staff and not share anything too personal or challenging. So that is to say, I think being a knowledge worker, you really have to be mindful of all of those things. You really need to be mindful of the spectrum at all times and work to find different access points whenever you can.
Thank you, Kate. Let me see. Sorry, flip it back and forth. Vicki wants to know, how do you find out what your donors and stakeholders want to find out about? Oh, she's intrigued.
That's a good question. Actually, you know, speaking of change and culture shift, we actually had an important milestone this past fall where we had a longtime donor finally ask us the question, ask myself and Anna, the monitoring evaluation specialist, the question that we've been waiting for a long time, which is, how do we measure impact? And for us, that was a huge sign of going to a different level of engagement and dialogue with our donors, of them not only being interested in our work and that it does good things, but they want more, and they want to see integrity and accountability, and they want to be able to speak to, many of our donors are organizations, so they want to be able to speak to their staff about our work with confidence, and they want to have a lot of trust in the fact that we're doing what we say we're doing. And so that was really exciting. But oftentimes our fundraising team is in constant communication with our donors and asking them about what they'd like to learn about, what they'd like to hear, what worries them, what concerns them. And we're trying to sort of improve that communication on a regular basis, but we try and respond as much as possible when we do get requests. And it's exciting to see that pull for information from our donors.
Thanks. One last question before we end, and if there are other questions, don't hesitate to put them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them online. The question I'm going to go to is, Hillary would love some ideas on how to get this momentum moving. How can an organization that's haphazard in its collaboration, sharing, and learning become more explicit and change its culture? Where do you even start?
I think that you start with yourself as a knowledge worker, and you need to walk the talk. If you're advocating for learning, then you need to learn. If you're advocating for sharing, then you need to share. If you're asking people to communicate, then you need to communicate. And for me, I've slowly built out my practice based on that, and my staff know that they can rely on me to deliver. They can rely on me to track learning and events and report back to them. They see me as the embodiment of a knowledge hub within our organization, and I think it starts from that behavior modeling, and it grows from there. And, you know, as any peer culture, you know, people see a good thing happening or positive results or change, and they want to be part of that. And so now I see staff members replicating that behavior, replicating these practices, taking the application of learning, like our program manager in Indonesia, to the field and sharing it with our partners. That's hugely gratifying, and that's what you want to see as a knowledge worker.
Thanks so much, Kate.
Thanks, Paula.
I just wanted to take this moment to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you especially to Kate for sharing her tips and tools. And I know every time I hear her talk, I come away with some ideas and am inspired. I hope everyone also leaves today with something that they feel they can take to their practice. Please send any comments via our event survey. Also, if you've enjoyed this topic, consider joining the network itself and contributing. This is a grassroots network where we hope people will join and contribute as well. And I think that wraps it up for today. So thanks again, everyone, and thanks, Kate.